While we found out who the victim of the murder in plain sight was, we were left hanging again at the end of the episode for another reason. At the end of episode 1, we were left wondering who on earth was Alan going to attempt to murder, and was he going to be successful? I've yet to see an unsuccessful attempt at a murder in plain sight, so the odds were high in Alan's favour. In the midst of Alan's mini meltdown of the task, I wondered if he was going to remember that it's a slow death and that the victim will appear at breakfast. I mean, reactions aside, Alan really needs to work on being more covert, as Kat and now Jonathan have had moments with him when Alan was being a bit too obvious. With the flashback, it was very much between Paloma and Ruth, as Alan had the best opportunity in the kitchen. I screamed when they showed Alan touching Paloma's face, mainly because Alan and Paloma are close and I thought Alan was going to pick Ruth. Paloma was one of the people that I found entertaining, plus she's from London too, so it was someone I was quietly rooting for outside of the ones I was rooting for more heavily. On the subject of rooting for, I have a bit of a conflict because there are people on both sides that I want to win. On the Traitors side, Alan and Kat. On the Faithful side, Nico, Tom, Nick, Celia, David, Joe Wilkinson, Mark, Tamika, Charlotte, Paloma, may she rest in peace. Wait, there's so many of them. Well, it's for charity, so I don't mind who wins. Anyway, the shock on all their faces when everyone arrived at breakfast was priceless, especially Alan trying to act. You had Jonathan stirring the pot with ideas while Kate parroted what Jonathan said about there possibly being a recruitment.
Hey, maybe someone was recruited.
But in a more dramatic way.
Maybe someone's been recruited.
No wonder some faithfuls think she overreacts. I don't normally talk about the fashion on display, but I wanted to highlight some fits. This is neither an endorsement or a drag. Let's start with Jonathan. His breakfast fit was quite something. It reminded me of something that I can't think of, but it also reminded me of something I've seen Jonathan wear before. He does have some interesting coats and cardigans. The other person I want to mention is Mark, the Scotsman rocking a kilt in a very wet Scotland. Also, Tom was reminding us that we usually don't see him covering his chest, though he is now retired from diving. I mean, I could mention so many more players because that funeral looked like a fashion show. I know there's an Insta account that usually highlights the fashion of the hosts, but maybe they could expand if they haven't already. With the Traitors picking the other two people that would also be lining a coffin along with Paloma, they could choose themselves to go in. It's been a regular occurrence that the Faithfuls think at least one traitor's placed themselves in things like this, so this didn't bode well for the other Faithfuls, or one in particular, as it turned out. Nico was one of the ones chosen, and now it made sense that Jonathan mentioned Nico's name earlier at breakfast. Nico's name was already out there, and the Traitors decided to help things along. As they were playing for money to be added, they needed to get their answer correct, though they were also losing money by taking extra clues. Everyone thought it was Nick that should be in the second coffin, but it was actually Lucy. The majority of the group thought it was Lucy who was murdered in plain sight, while Paloma was convinced it was her. Unfortunately, Paloma was correct as Claudia closed the door of her coffin, betrayed by her best friend in the castle. Production played a masterstroke and was also terrible at the same time by playing Paloma's version of Never Tear Us Apart. Despite the somber moment, they've now taken the prize pot up to £19,500. The early faithful suspicions were on Kate due to her reactions. She admits to the over-exaggerating, or using the same term she did, being a ham. Nico due to his apparent change in being in the coffin. Nico hugging Paloma could have been a sticking point, as Paloma had mentioned it earlier to a few people. Mark continued with his suspicions of Tamika because of her apparent change. Claire threw out the possibility that it might be the person closest to Paloma, though she only brought that up in the car. It sounded more like she wanted them to think about it rather than having any conviction that she actually believes it. Tom's name was also being thrown out. As the first set of votes started, we had votes for Kate, Nico, Tamika and Tom, but to me it very much felt like it was between Kate and Nico. When the ending credits started before Stephen's vote, I actually shouted at the TV. I believe my words and tone were something like, "Are you kidding me? Why is there a cliffhanger at the round table when you only have 9 episodes?" As you can tell, I wasn't completely impressed. I totally get production's perspective of having a cliffhanger when they do so. From a Get people talking and curious for a weak tactic, I understand, but boy did I find it annoying. What's more frustrating is that it wasn't even the last vote where there was a tie and Stephen had the deciding vote. Only half of the players had actually voted, so why was the cliffhanger at that point? That I can't understand. If the result just ends up being a standard banishment, then I will be even more annoyed, because then I will struggle to understand the logic of the placement within the vote as opposed to towards the end of it. The only thing I can think of is that everyone else goes in the same direction, or there is a surprise name thrown in that turns things away from Kate and Nico. I mean, it doesn't look good for either of them anyway. We shall have to wait until next week to find out.